Welcome to our crystal room. And not only is this our crystal room, but what we have here too is a lot of Native American flags out of respect to the different tribes of this country. And one of them that we just happen to have is the Hopi flag here. That I read something interesting about the Hopi Nation just recently, because they, like most Native people, have a lot of sayings that they have. And their one particular saying that they said was that when you sit down to eat, take a few moments to thank your food. When you sit down to eat, take a few moments to thank your food. Now the Hopi people, because we talk about intention a lot, put their intentions into living in a place that is so inhospitable that you can't imagine that they have lived there for thousands of years. Some people call them the Anastasi, which means the old ones. They've been there a long time. I can speak about the flag, but I'm not knowledgeable enough to speak completely about the Hopi Nation because I don't know all the different nuances. I do know one thing, that they, amongst all the what's called Pueblo tribes, are the only ones that speak the language Hopi. Their reservation, also called the Res at this particular time, is 1 million acres. 1 million acres. That's pretty large. And they live, their res is completely within the Navajo reservation. They have had the ability to grow crops in the desert where one would think they couldn't be grown. Most of the nations that they are members of live on what they call plateaus. At the desert, there are different raises of the land, and what happens is the plateau is quite a bit distance above the valley not being very deep, but what essentially they have is gullies. And when the water runs off, very, very little rain falls. When it runs off, it settles in the gullies, but so this is an area where they can grow crops. Now the crops they grow, of course, are primarily maize, corn, and they also grow beans, and they grow melons, some melons too. And interestingly enough, they also manage to grow peaches and apricots too. And when they plant their crops, what they do is they plant them in a bunch, a lot of corn. So what happens if you're planting several different corn seeds, it's going to grow up in a cluster. And the reason they do that is because they live within their environment. In their particular cluster, what happens is the wind is blowing, and the sand can blow away what we see normally as corn. Now, they don't just grow one variety of corn. They have maybe 25, 30, 40 different types of corns for each individual environment that they have within their nation. They managed to survive for thousands of years in this environment, which is quite amazing. The Hopi flag has in it 3 banners. One is next to the pole, which is the top one, generally is turquoise. And what that banner represents is all of society, all of living things, all things that we should have respect for. And that what we should do is we should understand that that particular part of life is where all life came from and all things came from. Not only crops, not only plants, not only animals, also we too, and also rocks and stones and everything. In the center banner is a white banner. The white banner represents you and me and the people. And what it tells you is how to behave yourself and how to respect and how to show respect for others too, especially the elders. On the top is the Hopi name, and I believe that means the peaceful people. On the very bottom is a yellow slash, and the yellow slash represents the future. They say that the yellow future can be a basket full of flowers, or it can be something else. How you live in the first and second place determines how you're going to live in the future place. You notice that there are some mountains. This is kind of hung sideways, that this is an area where originally some had come from the mountains, and now they live in the valleys and the plateaus too. There is a circle, and the circle is what one would call usually a medicine wheel, but this is the 4 directions: east, west, north, south, and the 2 extra ones up and down too. Some Hopis believe that we are living in the fourth world. And the first world up in the top left or right-hand corner, would be the world that they came out of, where essentially they came up from a kiva, which would be underground, which was the house that they came out of. And as they came up out of this hole, they came into an environment that was very hostile. This had a lot of volcanic action and a lot of fire. And they moved into the second world. And in the second world, they had floods and water and damage. One couldn't live in that environment. And the third world, that being on the bottom left-hand side, was essentially an environment of cold and freezing and ice that covered the land. And finally, they came into the fourth world. And the fourth world was a land where essentially we are in today. And that is where Spider-Woman, who was supposed to be able to make her net and make her web, communicating and relating to all things that there were. This is a very, very old story, and I'm sorry I do not know all the nuances of it. And quite honestly, a lot of people that are not native, or people that are native, are not privileged to understand that particular one. But now we live in that environment of communication and understanding. It might possibly be considered the internet that we have too. Once again, they have corn stalks on both sides. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 colors. And quite honestly, I do not understand the different meaning of the different colors. Sometimes they will say it means something, and sometimes they'll say it will mean something else. So the information that I have received has been essentially changing as the desert does change too. When they planted the corn, they had crops that were many different varieties of corn. Some of them had corn stalks that were very susceptible or very, very strong, and what they could do is they could survive in the wind and the sand too. But what happened too was they had different crops that they would use the seed for. Some of the seeds would go down actually 30 feet. 30 feet. That's how deep it would go. And when they planted their crops together, what they did was they would grow all together, and then what they would do is the roots would go all the way down and it would tap into the water supply they have. It's amazing that they were able to live in an environment that is very, very hostile for living in that area. I'm always talking about intention. And if you look at intention that people are trying to do on a little bitty thing when you're driving down the boulevard and not getting upset about the way other people are driving, can you imagine what the Hopi went through for thousands of years to live in an environment of desert and be able to not only survive, but to thrive and to be respected everywhere in the world? Not only that, they make beautiful dolls that are called kachinas. These are not toys, but these are ones that represent different spirituality. And also they make beautiful jewelry and beautiful basketry too. Very honorable people, and one that we all should respect very much. Thank you for listening to me, and I hope you have a very pleasant day. Pialawa.